Hi again, everyone. I'm just gonna pin the comment real quick. Okay. Hi, everyone. Hello. Good evening, everyone. So, welcome back to 100% Stay at Home today. It's Sunday, August 30th, 2020. My name is Joan, and I will be your host for tonight. So, we stream live every Sunday from 7 until 8 p.m. Jakarta time. And even though it's the last Sunday of August, I know you guys are probably not staying at home anymore due to the new normal and all, but 100% stay at home will still continue until October 2020. Can you guys hear me? Please let me know if you guys cannot hear me or if there's any kind of lag or something. And I want to inform you that you can also rewatch the previous episodes of 100% Stay at Home on our YouTube channel, 100% Manusia. Just type 100% Stay at Home on the search bar, and you will find that there's a lot of episodes and session that you'd like to rewatch. Or even better, you can go to our website, www.100percentmanusia.com. Today, or tonight, we're going to be talking about human rights filmmaking with one of our speaker, James Lefkowitz. So James was actually one of our festival guests last year, and he's an award-winning filmmaker from New York and also the founder of Neighborhood Film Academy. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to teach underserved community in New York City. And James is also the founder of 25th Frame, which develops, produces, and distributes films in 50 countries. So if you're interested in filmmaking, it's a very cool topic for you to tune in. And I have collected some of the questions from you guys regarding our topic, human rights filmmaking. But if you have another questions, just feel free to type it out on the comment section, and we will discuss about it later. Okay, I'm just gonna see if James is here. Hello.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me just fine?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. So for everyone who just joined us on 100% Stay at Home, right now I'm live with James Lefkowitz, a filmmaker living in New York, and I'm Joan. I will be your host for this session, and we're going to talk about human rights filmmaking. And as I told you before, James was actually one of our festival guests last year, right? And again, if you have any questions, just type it out on the comment section. So James, it almost been a year since you were here last year, right? How are you
Right.
doing? How are you doing during this whole pandemic situation?
Oh, I mean, for me, I'm just fine. No problems.
No
Doing good.
problems.
Yeah. But yeah,
That's
a
that's
year,
great.
a lot has happened.
I know, right? And thank you very much that you want to join us because it's very early in the morning in New York, right?
It's early for many, including myself.
Okay, so before we dive into our topic about human rights filmmaking, um, first thing that I'd like to know, can you please tell us a little bit, like what brings you to be a filmmaker? Like, has it always been your passion to work in the film industry, or is there any other reasons why you started at the first place to be a filmmaker?
Yeah, film has been with me for a long time, since I was a youth, even a child. And I've always thought about it, and and I went to school, and I continue to do it, and always done it independently.
Independently. So there's no other reason why maybe you are like, oh, I think I love film and I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be a filmmaker, or you just like out of nowhere wanting to be a filmmaker. You know what I mean?
No, I think it's always been a part of me. I always was artistic. I was different artistic background, but and I also came from a civil rights family. So I think that film has always been something that I understood to be a way to express yourself in a better way that I could just talking. So I always thought it was able to express myself, and I had a lot to say, and I just continued the process as technology changed.
Okay, so we're dive into our topic tonight. Talking about human rights filmmaking, I'm sure there are indie or independent filmmakers out there who are interested in bringing up human rights issues. And what are the most essential or the most important things to know or to do when we want to produce a film regarding human rights issues? Maybe like in producing or technical aspects?
Well, I mean, I think first is obviously first to understand what it is you want to say and to who you want to say it, and what is your message. From a producing background, I think that the one thing about human rights and documentary work is the technical aspects are probably less of a concern, especially when we're dealing with human rights, which even your phone is capable of documenting anything, and I think everyone knows that at this point. So I think with human rights and documentaries, technically and from a production level, handheld work, for example, it sounds like and looks like the truth. It's happening by someone. And I think for producing, it's just important to know is that if you have something to say and you know who you want to say it to, it's all possible in regards to documentary work. I think fiction work is a lot more technical, but documentary, get a camera, get a phone, and begin the process.
So first thing first is to know what to say and to know like who's going to be the audience, right?
That's right.
Okay. And talking about like indie filmmaking, independent filmmaking, do you find it difficult when it comes to like finding sponsors or funding? Because we have to admit that it's part of the process, right? To have like sponsors and funding. Like, how is it done? Or, I mean, how's the process? Is it easier in the US to find sponsors or to deal with the funding?
I think a lot of documentary work and fictional work comes, if you're talking from the independent world, is coming from friends and family. And I think in US there are a lot more friends and family with money. So it makes it a lot easier. In terms of going to sponsorship, yeah, I think there may be an easier time in other countries because the public funds or sponsors are more, there's more grants out there, I think, from other countries than there are necessarily in the US. I think it's important to know who your sponsor is, especially with human rights, and to understand why this money is available to you as a filmmaker, and what also you're supporting. Someone, like I said, if you know what you want to say and to who, that person behind the money is probably backing up that perspective. So it's just to know who to look for, and sponsorship, I think internationally is a much more about grants. And I think that process is about writing down what it is that you're fighting for and wanting to show to the world and document. So I mean, the first step in any project is to write it down in a clear, concise paragraph, what it is you want to say. I think once you get there, it makes it a lot easier to begin. Funding usually requires some non-funded material. So generally, you're going to have to film something that sparks the interest. And that would start from a testimonial or some news event that did happen. But you got to start with something to present it. It could be photos, but you're going to need to describe what it is, and sponsorship will come as long as you understand what your message is and who it's for.
Have you ever get into like kind of a difficulties when you want to write down your ideas, like it's on the top of your head, but you have like the difficulties of how to write it down? Have you ever been there, and what do you do?
I mean, I guess that's part of any writing process, is that, yeah, it's not easy to express yourself. Start with telling someone what it is you're doing. I mean, I think you just have to start with the most simplest way of expressing it, and get rid of any creative thought. It's just facts. So once you can stick to facts and truth, and this is a problem, I want to show it and show what people have to say about it. I mean, as long as you start with very basic information, I think that writing process is a lot easier. It's, I think, when you start adding a lot of the creative language and so on, I think that's what makes it hard. But stick to just key points, and I don't have necessarily those problems, just because it's like, okay, this is my story, this is what I want to say, and if you could do that, the paragraph will flow. And to look at there's a lot of grants and a lot of examples out there, and the internet, you're capable of finding almost everything that's ever been said about every film, before, after, and so on. So it's like, think about projects that have existed, or go to a film festival, look at their films and find out what films are out there. Look at how they wrote their description, and look at how their title and how they package it. I think packaging is where a lot of producers start from. Generally, to buy DVDs, and we have a box, and that's production, is thinking about that box cover, and what people are gonna to get out of it. So that's my basic framework, and I think if you stick to that box, you're good. Or maybe it's your profile, and what is your image for your profile, and what is the description of you, and what are your keywords and hashtags. That's basically how a documentary is formulated.
Okay, so what are the difference between producing films about human rights issues and another theme? What do you think are the differences?
In terms of documentary or overall, I mean, I think the human rights has a real urgency, and there is a minority group speaking, and that minority group is not the norm of society. So in human rights, you need to express and normalize yourself on a human level, and I think that's not necessarily the case in a feature film or a documentary. Well, I think a documentary overall express an interesting group, but I think human rights, it's definitely a group of people who are not represented correctly. And so the idea is to humanize yourself and your message, so that a person who's not of that group, or who is of that group, can get the message that you're a human with a mind and emotions. And I think that the emotions and the mind are the key to a documentary. With that comes is also truth and documentation of a reality to show actually what is happening, what's going on in that world, and present it to a world that may not know it. So it's hard to say, like the process and the actual making of, there's a lot of similarities, but I think just that truth is more important in human rights than in obviously fiction, which is all made up. Not that it can't express reality, but human rights, truth, ethics. I think all of these play a much bigger part in documentaries, and more specifically, human rights documentaries.
So, are you saying that expressing the truth or expressing the reality in documentary or human rights film, meaning that it's more difficult than writing fiction?
I think that there's difficulties are hard. It's definitely. I think it's actually easier because I can just show it, and I don't have to make it up. Like, there's a homeless person, and I'm going to talk to him or her, and that's already the truth. It exists. Like, there's a homeless person there, and they're human. Like, I mean, that's very truthful and very easy to do. I think it's also easy to tell lies. It's much easier to tell lies in fiction, but documentaries it's a very strange concept, because I think everyone has seen a documentary that expresses a lie, that is changing a perspective. So I think that documentary is a very dangerous thing, because it is there to say this is truth. And when someone's message is not truthful, it can also be very easy to hide. So it's very easy to manipulate what people say and to make your message. And I think in a lot of ways that makes documentary work actually easier, because it is a very powerful tool that you can take one quote from someone and place it next to something else, and it's a completely different message. I think within truth is, I think it becomes very personal, and then I think there's a few aspects of documentary, like testimonials and getting people's events from their point of view, and then there is the actual filmmaker's point of view. So like those are at work, and understanding. That's why I'm going to go back to like understanding the message. So once you understand that becomes your truth. And truth is a pretty dangerous word, but we would hope that documentaries are there to show it. And I think that's when the truth comes into play. And I think especially with human rights is, if we did see, right now we're dealing with police abuse in our country, and if I show it, that's true. Now, what happens behind the scenes, we may not know, but once we document it, that is what happened, and it's hard to debate that.
Okay, so we have actually a question in the comment section. In your experience, what are the main differences when preparing to make a documentary compared to fiction film? So the main differences when preparing.
Yeah. Well, I think that documentaries are more event-driven. So there's usually something that is time sensitive. This happens in film, but more so in documentary. So I think when producing, it's like to know the timeline, to know what's going to unfold, and it's more like a weather forecasting. It's like understanding where the direction of an event is going with your subject, and in film, it's much more of a controlled situation where I have this location, I go to this location, and these are the people I bring there. So organizing for documentary, I think that you have to be much more prepared to go and film at all times. there's a similarity there, but I think with fiction, it's like, I have this equipment for this time. And in documentary, you gotta, if you want to make a documentary, you must have some equipment. I would recommend having a camera and a microphone. So as long as you have those essential things at your disposal, you're able to capture it. There's a lot less need to perfect your image in a documentary. I think that often that you can, as long as you film it, it's okay.
So the quality does not matter?
Obviously, quality matters, but the truth is, if something's happening and I need to get it on camera, as long as you get it and you can hear it, it is acceptable. Because you have to remember that you're going to piece it together with a lot of other footage, and you can clean it up, but you got to document it. So you got to be ready. You got to have your battery. Everything has to be charged and ready to go. If you're doing with your phone, you got to have two phones. So you would have to prepare with your equipment that's always ready and always available. So in features, it's like a lot of times you're renting the equipment and working with a big crew. And a documentary, there's a very small crew. And a lot of the documentary work that is done today is, we call them predators here. They're producer editors, which also means directors and cameramen. So it's like, it's one person, they understand all the technical aspects of what is a good picture, what is a good frame, and what is good sound. And whether or not you're working with the cameraman or not, it's like, just having your team available is the main thing. So maybe you need to have backups. So like in documentary, it's like, you don't always use the same camera person. You don't always use the same crew. It's like, everything's changing and you have to be available, and you have to have people who can back it up when you need to document. If it's something more planned, obviously you're going to get your crew in order, just like any regular feature film.
Okay, so I can conclude then that it's actually kind of the same how indie filmmakers do or produce documentary in the US and in any other places. So it's just the same. All filmmakers are like that. Like, that's the process right there.
Yeah, it really does. Yes, correct. It's filmmaking is filmmaking. There's video, audio, and lighting. I think in feature films, you use more lighting. You have more time, and so on. So, but I just would like to say that, like documentary, it's like, just learn to don't move your camera and document what needs to be said, and you'll have the same stuff. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to read some questions that I have collected from our social media. There are quite a lot of it. The first one, do you think that it's still important for us to pick up human rights issues in films? Hence, there's already a lot of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's still important, and everyone has a unique message, and not everything has been talked. I mean, obviously, if something has been talked about a lot, I think it's better to join the cause and figure out another way, or maybe it's not about a full feature documentary. It's more short things to help bring together. But there's always a need for human rights when there's a need, and I think documentaries and the message that go behind it are very important. So yeah, you got to keep talking about it. It's less saturated market than there is in fiction, and we know that we've seen every story over and over and over and over again. So I think in those regards, like, there's always a need as long as you have a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the second question is actually kind of related to the first one. So do you think, how big do you think is the influence of films as a media to raise awareness about human rights?
This is a good question, and I have whatever, a little pessimistic idea about documentaries, especially in the longer form. I think that the longer form is probably becoming less interesting for many people, and especially younger people want messages fast and more dynamic, but it's faster and more real. I mean, reality has taken over filmmaking, especially in documentaries. Like, this is happening now, and we're here live. I mean, that's, I think, a very important aspect of human rights, is being there at the moment. At this point, it's become more journalism, but documentary still has a foundation and a life in the future of media. But I would say that short form is becoming more interesting. So I think that's in a lot of ways inspiring, because it's a lot more easy to do and a lot more easy to contain your message. And I think people's attention spans have decreased, and a 90-minute film dealing with a lot of pain and suffering, I think, is not everyone's what they want, but they do want to. I think that the messaging is going to be important. Just, yeah, documentaries, I think full length documentaries, it's a challenging question of its how it's going to last in the next 20 years or so.
And there's actually, when you said that people or kids this day don't really like documentary, or beginning to not have that much interest, there's this question. Hello, Mr. James. How to portray human rights issue in film without being boring? Thank you.
Without being foreign?
Boring.
Oh, boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, don't be boring. That's, I mean, it needs to be presented in an emotional way. There has to be a connection. I think that things are boring if there's no passion in what you do. And I think that usually that means putting some music behind it, or putting a powerful voice. Like, I think that someone crying is never boring. Someone getting murdered is not boring. I don't know, like, human rights will never be boring. I can't imagine a person who is behind a human rights issue who is boring, unless they're just repeating the same thing over and over and they don't have a voice. So it comes back to, what is your message? Who do you want to say? So if you understand your audience, it won't be boring, because you are that audience, and you know that they enjoy this type of experience, whether that's really fast or much slower, or however you present it. But no, I can't imagine that it should be boring. I think that when people think of documentaries, they think of the BBC, perhaps, and yes, that can be, and it's just information. I think when we get past information, we get into filmmaking. So journalism can be boring, yes. If it has passion in it, no. But hard to put passion in journalism overall compared to a documentary, which is like very emotional, very passionate, and very personal in general. The more personal you make your message, it's not going to be boring ever. Obviously, if it's a group of boring people who don't have any passion of their rights, that's a problem.
Okay, we have another question on the comment section. Some people are not comfortable recorded. How to gain their trust so they can act naturally, like there's no camera pointing at them?
Yeah. It's easier in fiction. This is definitely a difference. I think it's important to know, very important to keep eye contact. So that is the director or cameraman. If you're one and the same, you can't just focus on the image. So it's important to have eye contact. And once that eye contact is established, you're having a conversation, and the camera will disappear. If they are so unwilling and so uncomfortable, it's also understood that you can film their hands, and the voice is more important than the image. So depending on that situation, where images where people hide their face. So, you know, it's not important the image overall. It's important what they have to say. And I think most people are comfortable keeping their voice and allowing it to be documented. So if there ever is that problem, understand you can frame it to the person more comfortable, it not pointing at them, and then you move the camera back and to look at them. You'll get everything that you want.
Okay, so going back to the questions from the social media, does talking about human rights mean always to talk about issues?
Say what's the question?
Does talking about human rights mean that we always have to talk about controversial issues?
I mean, I think usually if there is a human rights issue, it is controversial because there is a majority who doesn't believe in the rights of that human. So I think it has to be controversial overall, or it wouldn't really be a human rights issue. It's hard for me to think that that isn't controversial, because here's a problem, people, and these are the real people who are involved in it. I think it has to be controversial because they're a minority compared to the rest of the world. They don't even consider this is not part of their thinking. So generally it has to be controversial.
Okay, so have you ever feel like you want to portray some kind of issues, but you got stuck because you feel like, oh my God, this is too controversial, I cannot talk about this? Have you ever been in there?
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I mean, it's that is the job. So have I been there? Yeah, I've done things which I think that there's probably more threats in countries. I mean, Indonesia has some human rights violations, would be easier to say are controversial. So, but where I come from, I mean, you have to be willing to represent your film. So it is going to be controversial, and yes, that is the job in human rights. You're going to have to face the facts. Too controversial? No, I don't think there is too controversial, especially in the art world. We can debate about it, but controversy is what makes a documentary exciting. I think for most of the audience, especially for the producers and the people behind it, in terms of being afraid of your life, that we're in a different question. Life is in concern. Yeah, you have to ask, why are you doing this? Are you ready to prepare for the worst case scenarios? So I don't know. It's like, what's that?
Take risk.
Take risk. I mean, this is the key word. I think in anything, whether that is in no risk, no reward, and that goes for your life, and that goes for filmmaking. Any film, and I think one of the main criteria when funding a film is what is the risk of the filmmaker. Whether that's from a fictional point of view or from a human rights or documentary point of view, what is the risk that the filmmaker takes? Are they getting in a situation that a normal person doesn't have access to? So if you have access to a place of controversy that is and a risky place, and you're willing to take the risk, that is the job.
Okay. So next question is actually kind of a general question. Which process do you enjoy the most in producing films, and why?
Yeah, this is a hard question because all of the processes are equally great and horrible. I think the ones with more control tend to feel easier and more pleasurable. Post-production and like sound design, it's very pleasurable because it's just throwing on the final touches. I think that writing and figuring it out is also it's all a journey, and it's all great and horrible all at once, and I don't find anything more good than another. It's really hard because like when you're documenting something or filming something and it's happening, this is an incredible feeling. When you discover the sentence structure to write your description of your film, can be incredibly rewarding and inspiring. So I think all along the way, you're finding these moments of, inspiration, pleasure, and also frustration. And,
Then what is the most frustrating process then? Frustrating process.
The most frustrating process is losing your footage. And I think this is a big problem now. Running out of batteries, running out, losing your footage, breaking, something going wrong is definitely the worst part. Back up whatever you record. This is number one, is like once you record it, it has to be put somewhere in backup. This is the most frustrating thing, and the most key thing it is to making a film is securing what you just recorded. This is gold, and you need to store it properly, and you need to protect it. And especially in human rights, it's like, I think with a lot of these controversial issues, it's like upload your footage right away somewhere, put it on wherever you need to put it, Google Drive, whatever it is that you store things in the cloud, put it out there so that your message exists. So I think the most frustrating is losing something and needing to redo it. That is the worst case scenario.
Okay. Still in a general question, how bad is the impact of COVID-19 pandemic for you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty dramatic. I think that filmmaking has shut down. I think we just opened up television production more or less, or somewhat, limited production. But yeah, it's just a time of contemplation and understanding, where you want to go. I think that funding is also a problem. Unless, I think for human rights, I think it's easier because there still are issues out there. But as a fictional film, I think it's not a great time to try to get money or even think about making a fiction. But I do believe it's a good thing for indie film because crews should be smaller at this point. And yeah, so I think that it's definitely taking a toll on the industry, and obviously movie theaters are kind of on the way out. So that's kind of not inspiring. So yeah, it's a big impact, and I think like the audience or whoever's watching or commenting is, like, yeah, what is film? Where is it going? And so on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that these type of live conversations are just as good as a film at this point, and being connected and part of a group. I think like TV is coming back to life, because to me, TV was this place of live event times that happen when they happen. Maybe they're recorded, but it's that moment that we're together. I think those events are coming closer. So yeah, I'm curious where film will go, because I think it's time for more personal stories. I think we're even seeing this with celebrities, or we're seeing into their home, and we're seeing into average life. So I think it's definitely hurt the industry, and I definitely work a
Yeah.
lot less than I used to.
Oh. So, like as you said before, this is actually my question. As you know, there are a lot of things going on, right, throughout 2020, and specifically in the U.S., like U.S. having the most case of COVID-19, or the rising of the BLM movement, and even the presidential election and its controversy. Like, have you been maybe coming up with ideas or inspired to make a new film project regarding what's been happening around?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very inspiring in many ways. Just because, like, you know, when I talked about documentary and the truth, and the truth is around us, and it's much easier to see the problems, which would be the truth, and it is inspiring. And you do think about it, it is hard to make a documentary film. It takes time, and in terms of making a current issue, to me, that's more journalism. Um, in terms of capturing this moment, I haven't put together an idea. There's just so much going on, and it is hard to travel the country and go to all of the places of, you know, of concern. So I think that, you know, there's a lot to be said about working with the media that's out there, and reformulating. I think for documentary, you're able to use footage that exists as long as you stream it together in a unique way. So I would be more interested in streaming together what I get from the media out there, and it would be maybe interesting to put that together with other people's voices.
Okay. So, there's some questions still. Hello, Mr. James. Do you have any movie recommendation that talk about human rights issues? Do you have any recommendation, or maybe your top 5 human rights film?
No, I might have to write that down. Yeah, you know, yeah, that's a really too hard for me to establish. I
There's a
don't
lot.
have I don't have a great answer, and I could think about it after.
Okay. So you don't have any upcoming projects then, or do you?
In
Like,
terms of,
what's going to be your in terms of like a film?
yeah, I mean,
Any?
I've been I have a feature film that I'm getting ready, and we're editing a short right now.
Mhm.
But I've been thinking more. I personally am starting to think more in the world of the YouTube content and shorter message and shorter clip. I mean, I do think that this is where we're headed, and I am trying to think in this way, is that in terms of documentary, a lot of it is going towards this, even TikTok. You know, it's just getting shorter and shorter, and it's like I think that people are getting information in new ways. And I think, coming back to the question of documentary film work, I'm trying to think in how to incorporate this into the next level for me personally. And I think for other people, I think that is also something, is put out those shorter messages. So I'm thinking in this way, to make shorter.
Okay. So to sum up our session for today, can you please give some tips for the audience who maybe are interested to bring up the human rights issues in films? Like just simple tips to sum up this session.
Find something that you are passionate about that is a violation. I think this is the most important, to stick to a subject that is very important to you personally, and to a group of people that you know. I think if you know people in a particular, world, that's your starting. Secondly, you need to have the best equipment that you can get, and that a camera with audio technology, audio capabilities is of extreme. So you really need to separate your audio and video in order to get your material. And you got to stay organized and make sure that you document and understand what you have and what you need to have. So and a lot of that really starts with the writing process. So if you can write it down and you can gauge where it's going, and a lot of people don't understand you can actually write a script for documentaries, and you can kind of understand what it is you want to say and where it will end and begin and what's in between, and you could predict what people will say and what you want to say. And I think if you write it down, it's really key to materializing it. So those are my basic tips.
Okay, actually, one more question from me. Sometimes I think why people find documentary are boring because, like the way the directors portray the issue, like maybe he wants to go to this point, but then they go to another point and then A, B, C until he gets to the point, you know what I mean? So how can we as director or like the producer make a film that is like to the point, straight to the point?
This is very, this is, obviously the director has to know what they want to say and not try to be cool and not try to, I think, all right, the main problem with many films that make them bad and boring or not interesting is that you think the audience is stupid. And the audience is a lot smarter than you think. So I think when you are able to talk to a semi-knowledgeable audience that may not know everything, but they do know something because they are watching this, they already know certain things. It's like, don't dumb it down. And I think that dumbing it down is where it falls apart. And dumbing it down doesn't mean that it isn't intelligent. I think that when you're trying to give too many facts, too much information, that's what makes it boring. Real passion, real emotions, real things are never boring if they are, like things that we can't witness as the, non-minority, like whatever that may be. If you're not in that world, it's going to be boring. And if you're taking it from a very distant look, it's not interesting. Like we want to see, we want to see the truth, and we don't want to hear it. We want to see it. So facts and figures, they have their point, but they are not interesting. They're not real. Like if someone says the facts and the points, then it's interesting. But to read something, no, I'm going to read a book. I'm going to read or a Twitter feed. Like we got a very short time for people's attention. So I think you got to keep it moving and not have too many messages. Too many messages is the main problem.
Too many messages, and just keep it like true and real, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
Go on.
I was just gonna say you don't have to make a feature film. It doesn't have to be 90 minutes long. A documentary does not need to be that long. So if your message takes you 10 minutes to say it in 10 minutes. Don't try to be longer than you need to be to say that I made a documentary. Who cares?
Don't try to be cool.
Don't try to be cool. Like if you try to be cool, you try to be smart, you're gonna fail. Try to be true, and you're good.
Okay, so we're almost talking for an hour, and thank you so much, James, for your time, because it's very early in the morning in the US. And thank you so much also for every one of you who have joined our session for tonight. And we will still be back next week, 100% stay at home every Sunday from 7 p.m. until 8 p.m. And again, I want to tell you that you can rewatch our session on our YouTube channel, 100% Manusia. Just type on the search bar, 100% stay at home, and then you can find any session that you'd like to rewatch. So thank you so much, James, once again. Maybe see you next year on our festival.
I would love to. I'd love to be there. I hope the festival continues to grow and build and exist.
Thank you. So, okay, have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.